The state budget squeeze is still on. Will public employee pensions pay the price? We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. A lot going on in state government, despite the fact they have no money. And we will talk about that today with a couple of experts in their fields. Scott Reeder is here, longtime Statehouse reporter, now managing editor, Illinois Statehouse News.
Great to be here, Bernie.
Welcome back, Scott. And Chris Mooney is here, political science professor, University of Illinois Springfield. An expert in state government all over the country, so he really gets to have fun watching Illinois. Let's talk about that state government budget squeeze that is still happening. Just within the last several days, Governor Quinn said we need to cut $2 billion from Medicaid. There's talk from the Senate President, John Cullerton, that because the state pensions cost so much and it's difficult to close the gap of what will be needed and what we have, local school districts downstate and in the suburbs should start paying their own pensions, or at least part of them, for their teachers, where now the state pays that because that's more than half of all pension payments that the state government has to make every year. I guess let's talk about that school pension things first, Scott. Is that how politically difficult would that be to get done, and can something in that direction happen?
Yeah, I think something in that direction can happen. I guess the question is it good public policy? I mean, to me, this is all about, instead of reforming pensions, it's all about shifting costs from one governmental entity to another. I mean, you can shift the state's cost off on the local school districts, and they'll be forced to do the tough things like raise property taxes to cover it. Or you can sit down and really take on the tough task of, looking at where can we cut, how can we change, how can we reform pensions, and it seems like
you're talking about at the state level,
at the state level,
to the school level. And
politicians are very reticent to do things that are unpopular or difficult, and that's what the problem is. They're all in avoidance mode right now.
Okay, I guess the question is, and before I go to you, Chris, I will say that Senate President Cullerton of Chicago was at the editorial board of my newspaper, the State Journal-Register, in the past week, and he talked about somehow, wasn't even sure how this happened, I don't know who knows how this happened, in state government or in the school system, the City of Chicago School District, based on its property taxes plus some state support, they pay their own teachers' pensions, but suburban and downstate teachers do not. Mm-hmm. The state pays those pensions for the teachers. Therefore, school districts don't even have an incentive to keep salaries low as they go into new contracts with teachers in the downstate and suburban districts. He said downstate actually pays its teachers less than the suburbs, so the suburbs really clean up getting a lot of state money this way. And wouldn't it be fair to have everybody, all the districts, pay part of their own? Does that change it? And he also said that this would be a negotiating tool for the superintendents or for the districts to say, we're not going to give you such a big raise this time, so it could actually hold down costs at the local level. I don't know. I just put that out there to get the other side of the argument. Chris, how does this look to you? Because it would clearly shift some costs to locals, and property taxes support most of the school costs, at least downstate.
That's right. I mean, it's a huge cost shift down to the local levels. The state of Illinois, in general, funds more of its schools on the hated property tax than almost any other state in the country. And we've been working around the state to cap property taxes and to try to shift some down. And there's been a lot of movement about that for years to try to change the tax system so that it's more based on ability to pay and less regressive, which property taxes are one of the most regressive taxes that we have. The problem is at the local level, the property tax is the only one you can't move. You can't, shift it around like you can other kind of taxes. So anyway, we're in a situation now where I think one of the reasons why the state is helping to fund a lot of those pensions is because of this hate of the property taxes, and so and a lot of times you get these situations where sort of irrational, weird cobbling together of policies over the years, sort of incremental thing, a little here, a little there. Nobody remembers how it all happened, and now it's all balled up. And that's what we've got here. And even if the Senate President, who's been around a long time, can't remember how this happened between the city and the downstates.
Yeah, I think it predates his time in the legislature,
It
too.
could be.
Yeah.
Now, you know, a rational, you know, if somebody would come in and say, okay, this is how it should be, and just impose a rational tax system and a rational expenditure system on the state, things would be a lot different. But
You're talking
that's
about like
never going to happen.
like a graduated income tax?
Well, or, you know, broaden the base of the sales tax.
The services that we don't now
Right,
tax.
you know, you don't pay sales tax on a haircut, but you pay it, you know, buy, you know, a pack of cigarettes, well, and plus.
Yeah. Plus that
anyway,
sin tax.
yeah, well, that's, yeah. Anyway, so that's one of the problems. It's difficult to make perfect public policy, it always happens in an incremental fashion. We're at a point now where big changes have to be made on a variety of fronts, pensions, Medicaid, yeah, Scott's right. It's tough, and nobody's going to like it.
Yeah, I would say, and I just wonder, as part of this discussion of schools, for so many years the discussion in Illinois was, well, let's move it off the property tax to the income tax. Our state constitution says that the state should be the predominant funder of education. That hasn't happened. It's been somewhere in the low 30% that the state actually pays. And there's been talk of this tax swap, you know, let's lower property taxes and increase income taxes. Well, since the financial collapse of '08 and the tax increase we've had since then, and we're still, you know, $6 or $8 billion behind in paying bills as a state, nobody's even talking about that kind of tax swap anymore. Is that just dead?
Yeah.
And we move on to just trying to patch things as we can.
Well, I mean, I don't even say if I think I would say it's patching things as we can. I mean, it's basically, we're not only dealing with cost shifting, we're dealing with decision shifting. I mean, basically we have these people in Springfield who are just kind of shrugging and saying, well, we can't do anything with this. Let's shift it down to the locals and see if they can keep a cap on salaries and solve the problem themselves. And to me, that's not leadership.
It's politically, it's hard for me to imagine how this is going to happen, too. I mean, local governments have a strong voice in Springfield. Every state legislator has lots of local governments, lots of school districts, lots of property taxpayers in their districts, lots and lots of property taxpayers in their districts. And of course,
a lot of them vote.
And that's right. And especially if they are feeling put upon, they're going to be more likely to vote. Now, Chicago is going to benefit from this. You've got you've got that sort of 30% of the state that maybe thinks it's a good idea, and even though the power structure in the state legislature is predominantly in the Chicago, made up of Chicago Democrats, they don't have a majority, I think, even in their caucus, and they are worried about losing seats in the suburbs, which is really going to take the hit, and especially in a redistricting year, it's going to be tough.
In other words, election year, hold off on big things like this. I do want to talk more about budget, but as long as we're talking about schools, there's something that certainly people who will be traveling to Chicago are going to encounter, and I'm wondering if it might come downstate too. But the governor, I think, was reluctant, but went along with Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel recently and signed a bill that will allow, I guess, speed zone cameras to be installed in school zones. And you know, Chicago has like hundreds of schools, and this is only for the city of Chicago in the legislation so far. Somehow they worked it out, where if you are going like, just 6 miles over the 20-mile-an-hour school zone limit, there will be a camera there that will take a picture of your license plate, and you'll get your ticket in the mail. As there are some red light cameras in the suburbs right now that do this, and some in the city as well. And so you won't have to even be caught by anybody. You'll just get the notice. And if you go 10 miles over the limit or 11 or whatever, I think it's $100. And I'm wondering, Scott, I think you're familiar with the issue. It's just an interesting thing as we move more toward technology catching you instead of the cop on the beat catching you. And do you think that'll ever travel other places in the state besides Chicago? Well,
it's being billed as a safety issue, but
certainly the mayor of Chicago says it's for the kids. Yeah.
Yes, but it sure brings in a whole lot of revenue. Those red light cameras, and now they suddenly want to go into this. The cynical reporter in me wants to say that this is more about generating income for local municipalities and that sort of thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if this spreads downstate and into the suburbs over time because of the appeal of easy money without, quote, raising taxes.
Well, we'll see how it goes. I know that.
Yeah, it's very similar to the sin taxes you were mentioning about cigarettes a minute ago. It's well, you don't have to smoke, or gambling. You don't have to gamble, so it's basically a tax that people voluntarily pay. In this case, you don't have to speed in a school zone. In fact, you're a bad person if you speed in a school zone, so you ought to be paying your $100. That's right.
Understood. Back to a more central Illinois issue, and I'm sure the governor's office, Governor Quinn's office, and Department of Human Services would say this is really a policy issue, but it's also an economic one because Jacksonville Developmental Center for developmentally disabled people, and then Tinley Park Mental Health Center up in the suburbs are both scheduled to close, and there have been hearings toward getting this done. And Scott, that of course is a big story in Jacksonville certainly and surrounding areas because you're talking several hundred jobs, I believe, and I think about 200 residents at that facility, and the state wants to reduce them like 20 a month and then basically move all those folks into community care. Some of the parents of those folks or families say that's the wrong thing. They've been in institutions all their lives, they understand it. And some of the experts in the field say it's the best to have community settings and it will cost less too. Do we think that this will actually happen this time, the second go around in a year that the Quinn administration is trying to close that facility in Jacksonville?
I'm skeptical, but you never know in Springfield. I think it's interesting that the legislative committee that's supposed to oversee closures seems to be universally against it, but the governor can go ahead and close it anyway. I mean, that oversight was created under Rod Blagojevich as a way of kind of curbing some of his more erratic behaviors. But I'm left curious, having covered when that reform was created, why doesn't the we call it COGFA, the joint, what is it? It used to be Eck and Fisk, and now
Commission on Government
Fiscal Accountability.
Fiscal Accountability.
Right. Accountability, that one.
That group
COGFA.
Was supposed to be the guys that could say no, and that doesn't seem to be the case. They can say no, but they can do it anyway. So I'd really like to know, having covered that legislation going through years ago, why isn't it working out the way people thought it would?
Well, there is that. I would note that I find it interesting that the area is represented by some pretty strong fiscally conservative Republicans, but of course there are many reasons that they are finding in this case to say that place should stay open, for better care and for the families, despite what some people in the industry say. It is clearly a combination of policies that's difficult at a time when the state is also strapped for cash. So, and it's an old facility that they say takes, I don't know if it was $1 million just to buy the coal every year to feed the boilers there, and that's the kind of thing that they're trying to avoid, those kinds of costs. So difficult situation for the people in Jacksonville. We'll see where it goes, but I'm not sure they can avoid the bullet this time. But we'll see how that goes. There's another issue. The governor has yet to deliver, I think it's in a couple of weeks, his budget address. Because when a lot of people complained that when he gave his State of the State address, which, let me add my view that at least he had it printed and he read it this time, and I thought he at least got his message across in a succinct and direct way, even though some people didn't see enough detail there. But he didn't give a lot of details of how he's going to make cuts. He just mentioned briefly the looming terrible economic news of where the state's budget is. But he did more recently say, I think at the City Club of Chicago, that Medicaid is going to be cut by about $2 billion. I think we spend about 14 or 15 billion now. That's going to be difficult, is it not? And how does stuff like that happen?
Well, yeah, it's tough nut to crack, but by God, it's got to be done, because some way or another, they either have to find a way to fund it better, or they have to cut, because it is eating up the state budget, not only here but everywhere, because healthcare costs, as everybody knows, are going through the roof faster than inflation, and revenues are not going through the roof faster than inflation, even though Illinois' revenues are up considerably compared to the rest of the country this year. So what they've got to do is they've got to either kick people off the rolls, they've got to
reduce eligibility.
Reduce eligibility. Say, well, we're going to bring it down from double the poverty rate to closer
I think it's like triple to like 1.8% or so, or 180%, something like that.
And you can stop paying certain procedures that are not paid for, or you can give a lower percentage or a lower payment to the healthcare providers. They are already complaining they're not getting enough,
right.
As well they might. But all those things are going to have to happen, and all those things are very, very difficult because there is a strong lobby for each one of them downtown.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, when you talk about reducing reimbursement to doctors and dentists and hospitals, what gets lost sight of is what that usually means is reduced availability to the patients. I mean,
less doctors,
fewer doctors will take those patients. So, I mean, a few years ago, one of my reporters did a story and showed where medicated patients in Carbondale were having to ride a train up to Chicago to have certain dental procedures done because there was nobody in downstate Illinois that would take Medicaid. And I think that those are some things to look at as well. And but I think you have to address Medicaid and pensions if you're going to really address the state's pension problem, the state's budget problems as a whole, because those are the two gigantic things that are growing exponentially within the budget.
Right, and I know managed care is another thing that the state says it wants to do more of, which is, a way to deal with patients that will give them more preventative care and less acute care, and so the cost should go down.
And again, limiting who can get in because they can't get there, and that's managed care is almost like El Dorado in some respects. I mean, it's the golden city that we think is out there, and maybe it'll get there sooner or later. The Quinn administration was supposed to start on this, have not done a very good job this year, and so to do more, how much is it going to save? We don't know. Probably not enough.
Okay. We are still in the midst of, I think, an ongoing discussion on the pension issue, which is the other biggie that even the governor mentioned, of can you change pension benefits of current state employees. And I know President Cullerton of the Senate continues to say that through the analysis that his top lawyer did, it's clearly unconstitutional. But you hear some people say, like Tom Cross in the House, the Republican leader in the House, his plan is to give current employees, a three-pronged choice: pay a lot more to keep what you have, or go to a 401k type system, or pay the same and get a lesser defined benefit at the end. Any idea of can this be resolved this year?
Can it or will it?
Well, will it?
It's an election year. The whole legislature's up. I have a hard time seeing them tackling anything too controversial this year.
Well, let's move on to something that affects everyday life. Well, at least in some ways. It's funny because some of us in our jobs carry around little tape recorders all the time. Everybody now has a cell phone that can take video and audio. But an odd quirk of law has come up that if you actually take audio tape of a police officer doing their job without their knowledge, you just click on your tape recorder or your phone's recorder, taking audio as you're being stopped by a policeman or having some kind of encounter, that's illegal in Illinois, and that's actually a felony to some people in certain situations. And there's somebody fighting, I don't know, I think you can get 15 years in prison for this. And State Representative Elaine Neckritz, I think she's from Northbrook, is got a bill in to change that. Any thoughts on where that's going, and if that odd quirk from the past will stay in the law?
Well, it's interesting. I just wrote a column on that actually today. It's going to run later in the week. But that eavesdropping bill has roots deep in Springfield, In 1965, a group of lobbyists were covertly tape recorded. It was the hotel that used to be the
Leland? St. Nick?
Yeah,
St. Nick?
No, not the St. Nick. That's home of a different scandal. But there was the place where the Commerce Commission is now.
I think the old Leland Hotel.
Leland Hotel. Some lobbyists were covertly taped talking about which legislators in 1965 were on the take. And this tape leaked, and the legislature, when they found out about this, was just so outraged they decided to make it illegal to tape people without their permission. And this has been on the books for 47 years now. And back in those days, you had tape recorders the size of a bread box. Now, you carry them around in your pocket. So it seems like technology has kind of advanced past that bill. But what I can't understand is it's not just police officers you can't tape. You can't tape anybody without their permission.
Yeah, well,
but it's only police officers that seem to be the ones that are charging people for taping them. And
they're the only ones that can charge you, right?
Yeah. Well, Anyway, do you? And by the way, I know as reporters, when I talk to somebody, I always, even on the telephone, I say, "Do I have your permission to tape?"
Yes.
And I'll click it on because that's what you have to do in
As do
Illinois.
I.
You have to have one person consent. Do we think this will pass, given the situation, and at least this might be changed? But the way the Neckritz bill is going, it will only pass for, I think, police officers or certain other. It's still, you still won't be able to tape somebody without their knowledge, like in a telephone conversation.
Exactly. Think about the Rodney King video from way back. If that was shot in Illinois, because it had audio portions on it, that would have been illegal. And that is why I think it's important that this be looked at.
Interesting. It's only been about a year since either passage or implementation of civil unions in Illinois. And now the chief sponsor of that and some other people, Greg Harris, state representative from Chicago, has introduced a same-sex marriage legalization for Illinois. We've now got, 6 or 8 states and District of Columbia that allow it already. Any thoughts on where this goes? I don't even think the sponsors think it'll pass this quickly, but where are we with that? Well,
you have to start any piece of legislation that's got any importance or controversy to it is never going to pass the first session. So you build a process, you introduce it, you start gaining momentum, you start getting some publicity for it, and that's what they're doing now. And this is an area of legislation that is changed unbelievably in just the last 2 decades. I mean, 20 years.
You wouldn't even have talked about it 20 years ago as a possibility.
20 years ago, gay rights activists did not want to bring this up. It was brought up by a few people who would sue their local courts, and the first one happened in Hawaii. It got on the agenda. The gay rights activists did not want to bring it up because they thought it was too controversial and it would make a backlash. But things have changed, and now Washington State, just the other day, passed a gay marriage law that the governor said they're going to sign. She's going to sign. It's up in Hawaii and some, New Jersey, Maryland, various places. Not that it's going to happen anytime soon in Mississippi or or Alabama, but it's happening in a lot of places, and Illinois is one of the places that is likely to. I don't know if gay marriage will, when it will, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it in a few sessions.
Is that right? It's interesting because this is one where you still get very strong opinions, certainly on both sides. But in Central Illinois, you have more of a conservative constituency, and a lot of people still think this is the wrong thing to do. Scott, you agree that it's going to pass one of these days?
I think it'll be a long while.
A long while.
I think that there are certain constituencies, not only in downstate Illinois, but within the city of Chicago, within certain socially conservative areas of suburbs that are going to be very resistant to it. And mind you, what we're talking about is a name now. We're not talking, with civil unions, we have all the benefits of marriage except for the name. So now, it'll just be interesting. So it's a symbolic issue in many ways, and it'll be very interesting to see how many lawmakers are willing to stick their necks out on a symbolic issue.
Well, I had some discussion on the radio, the sponsors or people who are in favor of this saying that gay couples who may have a civil union now are still being told at certain institutions, well, you're not married, you don't get the same. So there's not maybe the level of knowledge that all of the services they're supposed to be provided are getting provided in certain places. We'll see how that goes. Interesting, the Illinois primary, and of course congressional races will be a big deal in Illinois this year, this November, but the Republican primary still may be an open question as to who will be the presidential candidate or nominee by the time the March 20th primary rolls around. It seems like Mitt Romney has a big infrastructure in Illinois. Pat Brady, the chair of the Republican Party, has formed. Dan Rutherford, the state treasurer, has formed. Mark Kirk, who is, by the way, we certainly hope continuing to be on the mend, and reports have been good after his recent stroke, is a Mitt Romney person. Is Romney going to run away with Illinois, or is there a real battle in this state as we can tell?
Well, generally speaking, the Republican primary electorate is about 2/3 sort of moderate, you know, the people you just described, and a third of them might be thought of as movement conservative, Jack Roser and you know, Tea Party sympathizing sort of. And the question is, who comes out on Election Day? And you know, I mean, you would suspect that Mitt Romney will do well in Illinois, but you would have suspected that he would have done well in Colorado, Minnesota as well. So, who knows?
Any pontification there, Scott?
About the same as, you know, that's what Chris said. You would have thought he would have done better in Minnesota and Colorado, which are moderate states, and he didn't.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Rick Santorum, I know, doesn't have the infrastructure. He's got a little, you know, after winning contests in 3 states, he's got a little momentum going. And Al Salvi, who ran against Dick Durbin for U.S. Senate a few years ago, is a big friend and advocate of Santorum in Illinois, so we'll see where it goes. That is about as much time as we have this time. We'll keep an eye on these things as we go. Scott Reed or Chris Mooney, thanks for your help. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.